Everyone, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Chloe. I'm on the video team at Jazz at Lincoln Center. In just a minute, we're gonna join Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra trumpeter Kenny Rampton for an interactive masterclass on using mutes. After the lesson, Kenny will answer questions from the viewers. At that time, I'll jump back in and explain how to ask him a question. But in the meantime, if you have a question, as you can see, I've turned off the chat function. You can message me privately. But if you do have a question while Kenny is speaking, you can go ahead and use the raise hand function. In order to raise your hand, click the participants tab on the bottom of your Zoom window, and then in that tab, press the raise hand button. So Kenny will be answering questions while he's speaking as well. So if you have anything related to what he's saying directly, go ahead and use that function and I'll try to get to you. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Kenny. I hope you enjoy. Go ahead.
All right. Hey everybody, thanks for coming and hanging out.
We'll be answering questions while he's speaking as well. If you have anything related. Do you have your Facebook Live going? So with that, I'm going to turn. If that's your Facebook Live.
Oh, a second.
Help you mute that.
Okay.
There you go.
I'm going now. I got it sorted out.
All right.
All right. Hey everybody. Kenny Rampton here. Thanks for coming and hanging out. And we're going to be talking about mutes. I've got on my dining room table, I counted them, there's 158 mutes there that I pulled out of my closet and my trumpet case. I've got another 18 sitting on the piano. I've also got a set of mutes that I keep at Jazz Lincoln Center that we use with the orchestra that we tour with. Another set of mutes that I keep in the recording studio for Sesame Street for that. So I've got somewhere around, and several more in storage. So I've got somewhere around 200 mutes that I own, and I've used all of them in different situations. It's maybe a little obsessive to some, but to me it's fun. You know, just like playing the trumpet is fun. Now you see this, I got this virtual background. It's a picture of all my mutes. I'm gonna actually take that off because I'm gonna play a little bit of trumpet, and when I do this, it's kind of a weird effect with the background thing. So bear with me for 1 second while I change that virtual background for you. Just a sec here. It's kind of a cute thing. I like it, but it's a little annoying to me. All right, so here I am in my apartment. And as you can see, there's my table of mutes behind me. I've got several of every, of just about every kind of mute there is. And that's the reason. There's in different situations, you've got to use different mutes. There's a period when I was doing a lot of subbing on Broadway. I was actually playing 9 different shows, subbing in 9 different shows at one time, and I could get a call any night to play on any show, and I made it a point to make sure that I had the same kind of mutes that they used in that show. I wanted to make sure that I matched the lead trumpet player in every situation I was in. So you have different cup mutes for different sounds, you have different straight mutes for different sounds, different Harmon mutes, and they all have a unique sound to them. So I wanted to make sure that I would balance and blend within the section. And that's one thing that's very important to me as a musician and as a member of a group, is to make sure that I balance and blend. So there's different reasons to use mutes. A lot of people use them for playing solos. And when it's a soloistic thing, that's a different way of expressing yourself. So you want the right mute to express that sound. So I've got a whole bunch of mutes to create a whole bunch of different kinds of sounds for that reason. And it just adds to the arsenal. To some people, mutes aren't important. They just focus on their open horn sound, which is a beautiful thing, and mutes are kind of a second thought. To me, it's not that way. To me, mutes change the sound of the instrument, change the timbre of the instrument. And if I'm soloing, it changes the melodies that I'm gonna play. So it's important to really find the sound that I'm feeling and that I want to express myself through by using the right mute for my horn. If I'm, in a soloistic situation. A master of that kind of stuff, John Eric Kelso, is an incredible trumpet player, soloist, and he just did a mute master class a couple days ago that I watched. I was able to watch part of, and he's a master of the soloistic sounds you can get with mutes. And we've probably sniped each other 100 times on eBay, trying to get mutes, and we probably cost each other a couple $1,000 by outbidding each other on eBay for the same mute before we ever met. But it is a little bit of an obsession for me, but it's also a lot of fun. You know, just like playing the trumpet is. Trumpet is a lot of fun for me. I love playing trumpet, and I love exploring all the different kinds of things and the soundscapes that you can create through playing the trumpet and using different mutes. So I'm going to talk a little about different kinds of the same mute. And I mentioned playing in a section, and when I was playing on Broadway. So I'd get a call to go sub in Chicago on Broadway. And the lead player there was Johnny Frost. And Johnny used a certain kind of straight mute, a certain kind of cut mute, a certain kind of Harmon mute, and a certain kind of solo tone mute. And you know, plungers back then were all pretty much toilet plungers that were, that's what most guys have used. So I matched his mutes. If I was going to sub in the producers on Broadway, Nick Marcion was the lead trumpet player when I was subbing there. So I'd want to match his mutes. Same thing, all the same kind that he used. You know, and that's important. So I want to demonstrate, I don't know how well you're going to be able to hear through the internet, but I've got 4 different cup mutes here next to me. Let me start with this one. This is an old Shastock cup mute. This was my first Shastock. It was a gift to me from a trumpet player in Las Vegas who was a friend of my dad's named Tony Scodwell. He gave me this mute. It's real old. It's real beat up. I've never had it refurbished. I did recork it myself. I cut little corks and put them where the originals were and glued them on there. But this is adjustable. You can adjust the cup, the positioning of the cup, so it's closer to or further away from the bell. It's got a little screw here where you tighten it, and you do it so it's further away, and it's going to have a certain sound. So I'll just play that for you, see if you can hear the difference in sound. Okay, so like that is fairly bright. Now this is a mute that was used quite a bit in the jazz era. Miles Davis used this mute on some classic recordings. One of my favorites was this tune. Now he put it so the mute, the cup was closer to the bell. So if you look when I put it in, see how close that is against the bell? It's almost touching, but that gives you this sound. It's a little warmer, darker. Right? So this is a great mute for soloing. I love it, especially when you get it close to the bell. You can get right on the mic and get a really warm, dark, beautiful sound. Now that's a cup mute, all right? Here's another cup mute. This is kind of a modern day version of that. It's made by Humes and Berg, I believe. Yeah, Humes and Berg. And this is a fairly new one. The corks haven't been shaved on this one. And so that means it puts it farther away from the bell, if you see. So this is a modern day version of that where the corks have not been filed. All right. So as you can hear, hopefully you can hear it. It's quite a bit brighter. So when we buy a new mute, it's very important. We got to file down the corks, each cork, one at a time. Get some sandpaper or a nail file and file it down, like do 10 strokes on that one, and then 10 on this one, then 10 on this one. So it's uniform, and then test it and see how close it is to the bell. All right. These little ridges along the side here will dictate how close you want that to be, almost touching the bell. The ridge should be close to touching the bell. And then you're going to start to get to the sound that you actually want the company to be like. Now, this is an old one that I've had forever. Same thing, and I recorked this one. As you can see, it's sloppy and not pretty, but it fits the bell. It's much closer, and it's almost touching at those corner points where I was showing you. And that's going to sound like this. Now, I'm not sure, again, if you can really hear the difference for the internet, but it's a drastic change in the sound of it. So make sure that you guys, sand down your corks. It's crucial. It's very important. Now, here's one more cup mute I'm going to show you. This is a Ray Robinson cup mute, and this is my cup mute of choice. It's a little bit warmer. It's got a straight edge across here instead of the ridges, which brings it a little bit closer and makes it a little more intimate sounding, and it's a little warmer sounding for me. And you can see how close it is in the bell again. Now for playing in a section, this is my preferred one, but one thing about playing in a section, I always do my best to match the mutes of the lead player that I'm playing under if I'm not playing lead. So that's part of the reason I have all these different kinds of mutes, so I can match the lead player. When I was playing 9 different shows on Broadway, subbing in on nine different shows, every show I went to, I kept notes on what the lead player played and make sure that I had the correct mutes to go into that show. And that makes a difference. That makes a difference how the section sounds. That makes a difference on how people perceive you. And lead players, I know when I'm playing lead, I appreciate it when people in the playing in the section that I'm playing lead in pay attention to that kind of detail and nuance. So I think it's important to do that. Now, those are just a few different kinds of cut mutes. There are tons of cut mutes. I got some back here. Let me grab one. Let's see, where are my cut mutes? Here they are. Here's one that's metal. And it's going to be an entirely different sound. Now, it's got one thing. You can screw, there are threads here where you can screw this to change the length of it, to change how close it is to the bell. Okay, that's yet a completely different sound than the other ones. So, you know, when you play in a trumpet section, you want to balance and blend. You want to all be playing together, you know, and be able to blend together. So that's one thing that's very important to be aware of when it comes to mutes. Another thing to take into consideration when you're looking at playing in a section, you know, this shaftstock mute is adjustable. You can change it, but if you've got people, it can slip. So if you've got 4 people in a trumpet section all playing this same mute and it slips, it can be tricky in a trumpet section. So I don't use this one too often in a trumpet section or any adjustable ones in a trumpet section because it's there's too much room for error, especially when you're in a commercial situation. All right. So let's talk a little bit about some of these other fun mutes I have. I have some pretty old, kind of crazy sounding mutes. I love the buzz mutes, you know. So let me grab a couple of those. This is, I was told this is from the 1920s. It was refurbished by Roger Ingram for me a few years ago. And I don't actually know the name of this, but it's got like a little thing on the end of it where there's some mesh, some wire mesh, and there's some kind of filter underneath that, and it creates kind of a cool buzz effect. I've used this one for Sesame Street a few times and in a few soloistic situations, but this is fun. I don't know why I played Mommy. I saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus. It just came out, but it's a fun sound. This is a lot of fun to play with and explore with. It just creates, you know, when you put a mute in your horn and you hear a different sound, it automatically makes you hear different melodies. You know, especially when you're improvising. You know, so this is a fun buzz mute that I love to play with. Let's see. Here's one that a lot of people know and have used. This is called the Buzz Wow. It's a stone-lined Humes&Berg. It's got, you know, a couple little filters on the end. This one is a little bit wonky for me. I can't get a good stability in the pitch with this one. I don't know if there's something wrong with this one or not, but I don't use this one very often. And these things you can adjust, and I need to explore more with this to really understand why it doesn't speak for me. I should probably talk to a mute expert like what's the guy, Joshua, what's his name? Anyways, but this is another example of a buzz mute. This one is probably my favorite old buzz mute. I actually used this in a gig I did at Dizzy's with my group a couple of years ago. It's like, it looks like a tiny little pixie mute, right? But it's got a kazoo filter in the end. And so you put this in the horn, and it's really tiny, really small. And it comes with a plunger. Now this is a metal plunger, and it's got felt on the inside so it doesn't clang against the bell. Now the mute without the plunger sounds like this. Right? Okay. Now with the plunger, it gives it a whole different thing. So that one's kind of fun to play with. So I used this at Dizzy's on this gig, and it was broadcast, over the interwebs. And a buddy of mine saw it, a great trumpet player that I've known since high school named Ed Hirschman, saw it and asked about this mute, asked me to take a picture of it. And I did. I sent it to him. He said, no, take a picture of it next to a ruler. So okay, I did. Sent it to him. And because he was fascinated by the sound that this mute created. He'd never heard it before. And it's not something that's been used. It hasn't been used that much. Next thing I know, he started making them. And this is his version. This is the modern version of that mute. He started making them and selling them. And I don't know that he's making these anymore. He might be enticed to if enough people wanted them. But and because of the sound of reminded him of a bee, and so he called it the Chicago Stinger. Now the name of the the one I just showed you, the two mute combination with the plunger with the felt on it and the little mute, that's called the Chicago. I actually found an ad for that. That was advertised as the Chicago. I think it was from the 20s or 30s. So Ed called his mute the Chicago Stinger, and it's got a similar sound. Right? So this is another fun buzz mute that my friend Ed Hirschman made. Now, speaking of Ed Hirschman, Ed and I are also making our own mutes, our own plunger mutes, which just came on the market. We started taking pre-orders 2 days ago for that. So I'm going to show you guys.
Hey, Kenny, before you continue, we have a question from Amy Ballard. She wants to know, do you pick which mute to use in the piece that you're doing, or is it usually noted in the piece?
In the piece that I'm playing, if it's in a big band, it's always noted, but it just says cup mute. It doesn't say which one, so in Lincoln Center Band, or Jazz Lincoln Center Orchestra, I play second trumpet. Ryan Kaiser plays lead trumpet. So I pay attention to which kind of cup mute he uses, and I match his. So that's what determines what mutes that I use on that gig. I have a different cup mute that I use if I'm playing lead, that I like the sound of better. If Ryan's laying out and the lead part is in the second trumpet part for a phrase or whatever, I have a different cup mute that I use. I prefer the Ray Robinson sound, so that's generally what I will use. Or if I have something that's for cup muted trumpet with clarinet and tenor saxophone, and I'm the only trumpet, then I choose which cup mute that I want. But generally, most if not all arrangers will write cup mute, straight mute, Harmon mute with stem, plunger with pixie, whatever combination of mutes or whatever mutes they want in a general sense. But in terms of which cup mute to use or which Harmon mute to use, I determine that based on many factors, including if I'm playing lead or not. All right, does that answer that question? Okay, cool. So I want to talk just for a minute about the plungers that Ed Hirschman and I have developed. Wynton writes a lot of music for plunger, more so than any band leader I've ever worked with, in fact. And he writes a lot for tight or closed plunger. That's when you put the plunger against the bell so it totally seals. I'm going to grab my this is our new plunger that we've made. So when you play tight plunger, you're going to get this kind of a sound. It's almost like a Harmon mute. Right? So I've noticed that, when you play tight plunger, every plunger mute I've ever used puts the horn very sharp. let me tilt this a little bit. So as you can see, I've got a whole bunch of plungers here. Back in the old days, I heard that they used to cut coconuts in half. So this is one that I actually cut in half. I put a little bit of tubing around it so it doesn't clang so hard against the bell. I just wanted to experience what that was like, and a little strip of leather to hold it so it didn't fall out of my hand. So this is actually half of a coconut used as a plunger. This is a beautiful piece of art that Jerry Miller made for everybody in the Lincoln Center band. He's got my name on it, and you know, it's beautiful. That is another version of a plunger. This is one that a lot of people are using. It's a black plunger. This is a very commonly used shaped plunger. Let me see. Here's another common one. But I'm going to play for you so you can see how the pitch changes when you play tight plunger. Here's another one. That's enough. So this one. You how sharp it goes when you go tight. Here's this one. Same thing. Goes very sharp when you play tight plunger. This is one that a dear friend of mine gave me, named Stu Saddleoff, who passed away a few years ago. Again, it goes sharp. Here's another one. Again, it goes sharp. Every one of them goes sharp. Now, this is one I found in upstate New York many years ago. I was doing a thing actually with Wynton. It was the first time I ever worked with Wynton professionally. It was a series of videos he did called Marsalis on Music. And Dan Miller, a great trumpet player, he's now living down in Florida. Dan and I were driving up there together and or driving around there together, and came across a hardware store, and I was always going into hardware stores to find plungers to play back then, and found this one. This one's not as sharp. Check it out. It's still sharp, but not as bad. So, you know, like I said, Wynton writes a lot for closed plunger, a lot for plunger. And I found that we're playing in orchestras quite often, and these, you know, incredible pieces of music that Wynton has written where we're playing tight plunger, sitting in front of an oboe section, and they've got something unison with us playing tight plunger. And it can be pretty painful, you know, and you really got to work, and you got to adjust your chops to change the pitch. And so I decided, you know, I spoke with my friend Ed, who had made the Chicago Stinger, right? And started talking about plungers, and Ed said, man, let's make one. I don't have no idea how to do that. But Ed did, because Ed not only is a great trumpet player, but he's also an engineer, and, you know, designs, you know, I don't know, buildings and stuff. You know, he's got that kind of software and that kind of knowledge. So I sent him a plunger, he scanned it, he made a design for it, and we started having them 3D printed and testing for different sizes to see how the size affects the pitch. And this is what we came up with. Now check out the pitch. I could go up and down the entire range of the horn, and it's actually in tune. So it's the first plunger I'm aware of that's actually been made to be in tune that way. And there's also a little device on it. We call it the Kenny penny. There's a penny on the outside. There's one on the inside to open and close it, as you can see. So used to be you'd go into a hardware store, you'd find a plunger, you'd take it to the attendant, and you tell him to keep the stick. He looks at you like you're crazy, and you laugh and you leave. Then you go home and you cut a hole out. So you've got a section of trumpet players with plungers that are all different sizes, different size holes, and you don't get consistency throughout the section. Now we've got a plunger that is going to be consistent throughout a section. People can actually balance, blend, and play in tune with tight plunger, and also change the airflow for different reasons. So I'm very excited about this, and I just want to show you guys a quick little image. I took out all the research and development mutes that I think I've got 18 of them here. They're mostly trumpet, and there's 4 or 5 trombone as well. But this is most of them, as you can see. It's in there. Those are the plungers that we've been making along the way to test for size, to test for shape, to test for flexibility on how to hold and all those kinds of things. So we finally got that fine-tuned, and excited about that. But plungers, I've always loved playing the plunger. It's been part of my arsenal since I was 12 years old. You know, I've just always loved that sound and exploring it. So I'm very excited about this. And we just started selling them 2 days ago, so you can pre-order them now, man. I didn't mean for this to be a plug, but
where can they do that, Kenny?
if you go to Hirschman Mute's Facebook page, there is a link that will take you to buy the mutes. There's a link there. It's also on my personal Facebook page. I posted there as well with a little video of me talking about the plunger. So it's
awesome.
Yeah.
Someone just shared the link with me, so I'll share it with everyone in the group.
I think Ed is probably on here watching. So yeah, so I have a couple other mutes that are fun. This one is what's it called? The Emoyi Shastok. It's made by Shastok, and it's more or less like a solo tone mute. It has that kind of a sound, but you don't see too many of these. Right, so it's got a fun sound, old school kind of sound. Here's a new bucket mute. What's my man's name? Who's making these? I'm drawing a blank. I'm sorry, but it's a beautiful, warm sounding bucket mute. Plays really well in tune. This one is made of leather. Excuse my flubbing on the tune, but this is a beautiful mute. I really love this. I love the way it looks too, and it's got a really warm sound. You know, and we actually use these in the Jazz Lincoln Center Orchestra. We use the plastic versions of them though, which I have here. This one is for my horn with a smaller bell, so it's not going to fit on this bell. So you got to have the right mute to fit your bell. And he's making these in different sizes for different size bells. So the leather one I keep at home, the plastic one I use at Jazz Lincoln Center. So that's in my mute case over at Jazz Lincoln Center that I tour with. But this is a great bucket mute, and it's fairly inexpensive too. He's done a great job with these. But there's I've got some great Harmon mutes. This is one of the Harmon mutes. This is one of the Harmon mutes we use at the Jazz Lincoln Center. It's made by Charlie Davis. And it is the most in-tune Harmon mute I've ever played. Play with the stem or take the stem out. As you hear, you can go all the way down to low F sharp in tune with this. I was just talking to Charlie Davis today, in fact. And he developed this mute out of necessity. The same reason Ed and I developed the plunger mute together. He was doing a show where he had to go from open horn to Harmon mute trumpet, and the Harmon mute trumpet was unison with the strings or something like that, and he had 2 beats to do it, so he had enough time to get the mute in, but not enough time to change the slide. So he actually created a new Harmon mute that was actually in tune, so he didn't have to change the slide. The way in the moment, the way he solved it was he brought another horn. He had enough time to change horns, but not to put in a mute and change the slide position for the pitch of it. Now here's another Harmon mute. This is an old school, this is an old Con Harmon mute that I love. This is one of my favorite mutes. And it's got a different sound. Now you can hear when you get in the lower register, this one gets a little squirrely, you know, but it's got a different sound. It's got a great sound. So I love to use this for soloistic things. It means it limits my lower register. I can't play certain notes that I can play with Charlie Davis's mute, but I love the sound of this one for certain things. So I go back to this one sometimes. So, you know, you use the right tool for the job, just like with mouthpieces. You know, you use a big mouthpiece to get a certain sound. You use a small mouthpiece to get a certain sound and to do a certain job, you know. Bobby Shue one time told me, you know, when you're putting a nail in the wall to hang a picture, you're not going to use a sledgehammer for that job. You're going to use, a small hammer, and you got to use the right tool for the right job. So that's why I have so many mutes. There it is, Easy Bucket. Good, thanks, whoever posted that. Chloe did.
I'm getting some help from someone named John Charles Thomas. I don't know if you know this person.
No, I'm trying to think of the guy who makes an Easy Bucket. I'm drawing a blank, man. Super cool guy. Anyways, I'll apologize.
Whoever you are, John, thanks for all your links that you're sending me.
Yeah, man, thanks. So I can keep going on. Do we have any questions coming in, Chloe?
Yeah, I think what I'll do is I'll open up the chat at this point since we seem to be doing okay. The reason we closed the chat, everyone, is we've been having some Zoom bombing issues, but it seems like this is a safe group. So I'll open up the chat. If people want to throw their questions in there, you can also use that raise hand function that I mentioned. So go ahead and at the bottom where you see participants, you can press the raise hand button if you have a question for Kenny.
That's cool.
Yeah.
All right. And let me see if I can find another fun one. This is a great mute. Excuse me while I run all the way over here to get it.
We have a question from Jeffrey. Jeffrey, if you want to ask your question.
How are you doing, Mr. Rampton?
What's up, Jeffrey?
Quick question. I don't know if we're on the topic yet, but I need, sometimes I just wake up and it'll be early in the morning or either I'm staying up late. And I really need a mute to be transcribing where I can hear myself, but at the same time, I'm not too loud to wake the people in my house up. Do you have any recommendations for any good mutes practice mutes that'll silent your sound, but not too much?
Okay. Let me pull these over here. Just give me 1 second.
Right. While Kenny's doing that, let me take a moment to say, for anyone just joining us, Masterclass by Kenny Rampton from the Jazz Lincoln Center Orchestra, brought to you by Jazz Lincoln Center in New York City. Thank you all so much for joining us. I want to just take a moment to give a huge thanks to all of our supporters who help us serve this global jazz community. We wouldn't be here without you, and your support means so much. One more thing I'll request is that if you do have a question, please change your name so that I can call you by your name. I see someone's raised their hands that just has some initials, so it would help us if we could get your full name. You can do that by let's see how you do that. Open up the participants tab, find yourself near the top of the list, press rename next to your account name, and then I'll call on you and turn on your mic so that you can speak to him. Awesome. All right, so if you wanted to answer Jeffrey's question now, sorry to interrupt.
All right. Thank you, Chloe. So Jeffrey, I've got several practice mutes. Some have been given to me, some I've bought. They all kind of have a similar feel. One of them I actually made. There's also a little device you can put into the end of Harmon to plug it. It's got a little hole drilled through it so the air has somewhere to come out, and that works pretty well as a practice mute. This is one.
That's the one I usually use, but it covers up my noise way too much where I can't hear my pitch sometimes.
Okay, this is another slider. I think it's made by Best Brass. It's pretty quiet. Now this is another one made by Best Brass that you can actually plug headphones into, and you can actually put it into an effects box and things like that. And it's got all kinds of.
What is it called?
It's made by Best Brass. It's got an auxiliary in, headphones, and a line out. So this one is actually pretty cool. It's small. This one is silent brass, made by Yamaha. Yeah. It's also got a plug for headphones, and you can route it through X and through an amp and all kinds of stuff. I've actually used this one on gigs to play through effects, and it's a good practice mute too. It's got a little less resistance than the other ones. It's a little freer blowing. They're all pretty quiet. And this is one I made. I made it out of, Renews It. I actually made it out of Renews It and, put double strip tape on the end of it to act as the cork.
That's
and
cool.
It actually works pretty well, and it's really cheap because I made it. These ones, these runs for like $100 or more.
Yeah.
They're expensive. They work well, and if you really need something where you can hear yourself playing, the headphone attachment is nice. So that's what I got for practice mutes. There's all kinds of different brands of practice mutes out there, but try them out and see what works for you. You know, and if you need
Thank
something
you.
where you can really hear yourself, then get one of the ones with headphones. It's a little bit of an investment, but it can be worth it for you. Plus, it can give you an option to be able to actually record while using the mute if you want to do some tracks that way. So, you know, that might be something that would be that would work for you.
For sure. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right, Jeffrey.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Awesome. We're going to go to Chathan Nickerson. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm 11, and I was wondering, I've been playing for about 4 years now, and I was thinking, what would be a good starting mute for me?
All right. Chathan, is that how you say your name?
Yeah, Chathan.
Chathan, what's happening, man? You're 11. You've been playing for 4 years. So that means you started when you were 7. Is that right? I'm not very good at math.
Oh no, sorry, 3 years. 3 years.
Okay, so you started when you were 8 or 9?
Yeah, in fourth grade. Yeah.
That's amazing. Now, what made you start playing the trumpet? Let me ask you that.
Well, I've always wanted to play the trumpet. When I was younger, my mom and I, we lived in the city. We used to go to Jazz Showcase a lot and like see Roy Hargrove, and I've always really liked him. So I had my eyes set on the trumpet for a while. And when I tried it out, it was the only instrument that I could make a sound out of.
That's great. So you're in Chicago? Where are you?
Well, right now we're in the suburbs. We were in Chicago, but we moved here about 5 years ago.
Okay, cool. There's actually a great trumpet player and teacher in Chicago who's a great friend of mine. We're actually roommates together in Brooklyn, and we toured together. We're roommates on the road with Ray Charles. His name is Chuck Parrish. I want you to write his name down and look him up to get some lessons with him. He's wonderful.
Okay.
There's a lot of great teachers in Chicago. So in terms of a good mute for you to start out with, well, I would say every trumpet player kind of needs a set of mutes. There are 4 basic mutes that we should all have. There's a cup mute, there's a Harmon mute, there's a straight mute, and there's a plunger. I would say those 4 mutes. And start with a cup mute. They're the ones that I showed you, these ones.
Right.
Right? I would start with one of those. And like I said, you got to file the corks down so it fits. So these ridges here are almost touching the bell, but not quite when you insert it all the way. Make sure you file them down evenly, one at a time, and then check it. Then do all 3 again, and then check it. You know, it's going to take a little while, but get some fine grade sandpaper, sand them down, and make sure that it fits your horn so it seats in there properly and it's close enough to the belt. But I would recommend starting with a cup mute if you want to just choose one. But ultimately, you want to have a set of 4. The cup, the Harmon, the straight, and the plunger. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Chathan. All right, everyone. If you have a question for Kenny, please don't be shy. Use the raise hand function in Zoom, or go ahead and write your question in the chat. We have a question from an Alexander Rubin.
All right.
Hi, Kenny.
Hi, Alexander. What's up?
I just wanted to know if you could talk a little bit about plunger technique. Haven't had any formal instruction on that. It's mostly just been like watching Clark Terry and various people using the plunger. But I wanted to know from a reputable source what you kind of have in mind when you're using the plunger.
Okay, well, thank you. That's a great question. I appreciate it. There aren't many books about playing the plunger, about plunger technique. I know of one by Al Gray.
What's that called?
I'm not even sure.
Okay.
I have a digital copy of it somewhere on my computer, and I've read it. And he talks about all the different positions of the plunger, from here to here to here to here to here.
Yeah.
You know, I think he has like 5 different positions for the plunger and different techniques, going wah or ow, playing closed, all kinds of different things you can do. The main thing I would recommend and that I do recommend for people to practice when practicing the plunger is to see it as that, see it as a technique.
Yeah. Not
just as a gimmick. You know, most people see the plunger and think it's a gimmick. You go, you know, and that's it. No, it's a lot more than that. So,
yeah.
You know, as we all know, you know, any instrumentalist knows we got to practice our fundamentals on the instrument to get good at it.
Yeah.
You know, same thing is true of the plunger. You got to apply those fundamentals of the plunger. So anything that you practice on the trumpet, you can practice with a plunger. One thing that I give to students is Clark studies from the Herbert L. Clark Technical Studies book, you know. You know, start applying plunger technique to your trumpet techniques that you practice every day. So it's important because that helps to develop the coordination. Now, when we play with a plunger, I always think of it as I visualize my air as almost like a ball, you know, like a baseball being pitched to a catcher. All right, and so the ball of air goes through. Now, this isn't what actually happens, but this is what I visualize.
Yeah.
The ball of air goes through the horn. I catch it with the mitt, with the plunger, and then I throw it out to the audience. So when you do the plunger, you got to play a little more on top to make sure it gets out to the audience, and you got to flick it fast. You got to have quick wrist motion to get the sound out in time. Otherwise, it's going to sound like it's behind the beat all the time.
Yeah.
So that's an important thing to be aware of when you practice. So the way to develop that is create exercises for yourself. You know, we are all our own best teacher. You can have a million different teachers tell us something, but you are your own best teacher.
Absolutely.
You know? And we got to figure things out on ourselves. You know, I've had a lot of teachers in my life, but they can't practice for me. And they're not going to be able to intellectualize things for me. I got to internalize things and understand them. You know, so we got to be relentless with ourselves, be honest with ourselves, and focus on these things that we want to get better at. So create your own exercises. I like to take ballads and play ballads with the plunger. Like, you know, things like that.
Yeah.
Take any ballad that you like, any song that you like, and plungerize it.
Yeah, that's great. That's really
with
helpful.
the plunger, you know, and that's going to help you to develop the technique. And the only way to develop the technique is by doing it. You got to look at, like you, I love the fact that you, your question was about developing technique, because that's exactly what it is. And just like any other technique, you got to practice it. You know, it's not just going to happen because you got the mute. It's going to happen because you got the mute and you practice with it and you figured out how to make it work, right?
Yeah. Thanks.
That's your question? You're welcome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Alexander.
Here's another mute I want to show you guys, man. This is a cool mute. I found this, I was on tour with John Hendricks, and I was in Paris and found this mute. It's made by Emo. I found it in a music store in Paris, but it's like a small Harmon mute made by Emo, and it's made of plastic. It's got a little metal tube. Now the tube will push all the way down inside or come all the way out. It's just like a stem for a Harmon mute, this little tube, you know, and I actually recorded with it a few years ago. I just posted it on Facebook a couple days ago. Great singer that the dear friend of mine named Pat Cicerano. I used this in one recording, but it's got a real unique kind of cool sound. And it's very much like a Harmon mute, but it's a little more compact. It's a little, you know, it's a little different. So I really love this one. This is a fun one to play. This is the only one of them I've ever seen. I don't know if anybody else. Stephen Bernstein might have one of these, or Kelso, another mute nerds like me. But this is a great little mute. I enjoy playing on this one. Got any
Awesome.
questions?
Yeah, we got a question from Robbie Cruz. Go ahead, Robbie.
Hi, Kenny. How you doing?
What's up, Robbie?
I just wanted to know, you know, a lot of us have a lot of time to practice now, and I just feel like maybe sometimes I could be overdoing it. I just wanted to know what your concept was on rest and kind of being consistent with all this time. How can we balance ourselves without overdoing it? How can we make sure that we're consistently developing without kind of too many setbacks or injuring ourselves?
That's a great question, man. Thank you. That's a really thoughtful, great question, Robbie. I'm going to get a little bit off topic now then, a little off topic from mutes and talk about trumpet. This is something that I didn't understand when I was younger, and that I started to understand later in life when I went through an embouchure change and had to rebuild my chops from ground zero. And it's something I learned from the great Bobby Shue. Many of you probably know Bobby, know who he is. Bobby's still around. I talked to him yesterday, and still teaching. In fact, he's got a website, bobbyshoe.com. If you go there, you can still get lessons with Bobby through Skype. And I recommend any serious trumpet player to look up Bobby Shue, go to his website and get a lesson with him, because he charges very little, and he's a genius when it comes to teaching trumpet. And this is some information that I got from him, so I want to credit him with this, something he shared with me. It's very important to practice as much as you, to rest as much as you practice when you're playing, when you're practicing. All these muscles in here they're pretty small muscles, really. And you finally, you develop them, and they become pretty finely tuned as trumpet players, and they have memories. So if you play to the point where you're tired and then you rest, the next time you pick up the horn, those muscles are going to remember the last feeling they had, which was being tired. We've probably all experienced that, like playing a gig late at night. I remember when I used to do a lot of salsa gigs. Man, that's hard work. You bash your chops all night long to the point where it hurts, and you got to keep going. You got to keep playing. Then you go to bed. If you think you sleep it off, you wake up. You get up the next morning, pick up the horn, and your chops still feel tired, and they're swollen. And so you got to be very careful. Those muscles have memory. So right now we're in a situation where we have a lot of time to practice, and it's good that you're doing that, man, because it's very important right now to utilize our time in a positive way. And that's an incredibly positive thing to do. The world is in a strange place right now, man, and
Yeah.
something Wynton Marsalis talked about a long time ago in a master class in front of probably 2,000 kids was every situation has a positive side and a negative side to it. So be aware of all the negativity, all this stuff that's going on, that we don't know where things are going to be 6 months from now even, or a month from now. It's, things are very uncertain. Be aware of all that, but utilize your time positively. Utilize your time in a positive way to do something to help build yourself. So when we come to the other side of this, we're all going to be stronger than when we were when it started, right? So the fact that you're practicing says a lot about your character, who you are as a person. I love that. That's great. So it's important to rest as much as you practice. There's somebody who's told me about an app a couple days ago. I was doing a Q&A online, and I wrote it down. I don't have it in front of me, but there's an app that actually you can program things into it and set timers for yourself. So you practice for 2 minutes, you rest for 2 minutes. So it's really done that, it's regimented that way. Or you can just practice to the point, this is the way Bobby Shue described it to me. Bobby said, practice to the point when it's really feeling good, and then take a break. Take a break for 15 minutes and pick it up and play for a little while longer, play a few more exercises or tunes or whatever it is you're working on. And stop while it's feeling good, rest, and you can practice all day long. When you approach practicing that way, you're building these muscles. You're building all the muscles in the face that need to be strengthened, and that's what builds your endurance. Mm-hmm. If you play to the point when you're tired, you start to break those muscles down. So never play to the point when you're tired, and if you do, then just stop for the day. And when I get up in the morning, I get in the shower, I flutter my chops with the hot water blowing, or hitting on my face. That pushes all the blood through and it gets all the muscles to relax. And that's how I usually warm up, is in the shower, just with the hot water hitting my face. That makes my chops feel better when I flutter my chops like that in the shower. And then maybe buzz a little bit, kind of get the buzz going. Then I take my horn out, and it doesn't take me much time at all usually to warm up when I do it that way. But it's very important to practice as much as you play when you practice. That's a great question, Robbie. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. All right. Any other questions, or should I just go on about mutes? Okay, let me see. This, I just mentioned Bobby Shue. So this is a Harmon mute that Bobby Shue developed called the Soloist. And it's a great sound in Harmon mute. Now, if you see, I got a plunger attached to the end of it, and that's something that Bobby used to do. It's a small plunger, and this is what small plungers are good for. Put it on the engine mute and explore more sounds. So this is, I think, is a sync plunger. But this is a great sound of mute. I haven't played it in a little while. You want to make sure when you use cork that it's damp. So you can just, wet a finger, make it, rub it against the cork so it'll stick in and not fall out. All right. So this is a cool sound of mute. All right, it's very similar to a Harmon mute, and it's almost kind of like the little French one, or the one I got in France, the plastic ones, almost got that kind of a sound, but it's a little more focused than that. Now I put this plunger on here probably 10 years ago, and I'm afraid to take it off because rubber breaks down and it'll crack, so I just leave it on there. I want to find another one of these so I have a regular soloist as well. I got to call Bobby again and see if he's still making these, or if they're still making them, but this is a great Harmon mute and plunger combination. Now, one thing you can do with combinations like this, with a plunger, you can create more effects utilizing this hole in the end. Check it out. I don't know if you can hear that through the interwebs, but it gives it a little wah effect with that. Now, that's part of the reason with my plunger, you know, we have this thing where we can open and close this, the hole. Now, when I first met Clark Terry, I was playing with John Hendricks at the time, and I had some plunger stuff, and Clark came up to me afterwards, and he was complimentary. He was super nice, super cool, and I sat and talked with him for at least an hour, and he became, I mean, he was just such a great mentor to all of us, man. To anybody who ever met Clark Terry, you know, he was an incredible mentor to everybody. But I remember he looked at my plunger and he said, "All right, son, now you got to cut a hole in that plunger." I didn't have a hole in it. I didn't know. And so he had me cut a hole in the plunger. And then he said, "Now you got to put a coin in there. So in case you get kicked off the bus, you got something to make a phone call with," which I thought was hilarious. But he would put a coin inside the plunger. If you look at these, well, here's one. This one's got a nickel inside of it. And you tilt the nickel. I don't know if you can see it or not, but you tilt the coin that's inside of it to get different timbre of the plunger when you're playing with it. So we decided to create that device inside of our new plunger, the one that Ed and I developed. It's called the KR Indigo plunger. So you can play with this closed plunger, which is how I like to play when I use a pixie or a straight mute in the bell, or open when I'm not using a straight mute or pixie mute, as they call them, inside the bell. So this is a cool effect, but in the open position, you can do that type plunger, get that same kind of effect with the finger. So you can create different effects that way with your finger with this plunger as well. So that's kind of cool. Now I mentioned pixie mutes. Let me grab a few different pixie mutes here. The things that I know people have used as pixie mutes. I've got a whole bunch of them. So people call these pixie mutes. Stephen Bernstein hit me the other day that wasn't actually a term that the cats like to use. But that is actually the brand of the mute. It's a pixie mute made by Humes and Berg. That's the brand name of it. And there's all kinds of different things we can do with these pixie mutes. Now, when using the pixie mute, I close the penny on this because it gives more wah effect. Now, here's one without a cork, because sometimes you want to seat it inside the plunger and hold it, you know. This is like the standard that most people use. I painted it black just because I thought it looked cool. But it's normally red and white. This is a Humes and Berg standard pixie mute. I recorked it, and you know, I've always recorked and played with mutes and made mutes my whole life. It's just been fun for me. So this is, you know, one tune that I do with Jazz Lincoln Center Orchestra regularly is Mood Indigo. We all know that tune. So this is the mute that we use for that, is you know, what people refer to as the pixie mute. Now that's in the closed position. Now when you get the middle section, you use more wah effect. That kind of a sound, right? So that's a pixie mute. Now this is a standard one. I think it was actually Clark Terry again who told me when you get these, there's a little stem inside of here that you got to knock out of it and pull out of it. So let me see, I've got one of those. Here's one of those where I pulled it out. I don't know if you can see, as opposed to that one where it's still in there. That makes it a little more free blowing, makes it so it projects a little bit better, and but it makes it a little sharper. It puts a little more out of tune, and you lose the bottom like fourth of your range with when you do that. But most of the pixie mute stuff that Duke Ellington wrote was for pep section, and it's in the middle to upper register, so you don't need that lower register. So this works well for that. Let me see here. This is what I was told was the original quote pixie mute that they used to use back in the day. This is an old, and if you could read it, if it wasn't so tarnished, it says Con. Let me see. It's hard to read. It says Con, yeah, it says Con on there. And this came with the old Con cornets back in, I don't know, the 20s, I guess. And fits into the bell pretty snugly. It's got very unique corks. Here's one where one of the corks came out, and you can see it actually is an indentation. It goes in. And here's the outside. So the corks stick out. This one I recorked. I use wine corks and just cut them down to the right shape. And that's, you know, that's what they used to use back in the day. All right, and that gets a good sound. Now, but again, it's pretty stuffy, and the lower register isn't great, and the pitch on it is a little funky. This is one that I found is made by Elton, who makes the hat mutes, which I'm going to show you in a minute, or used to make the hat mutes, and it feels like it's aluminum, and it's pretty squirrely. But it's got a good cut to it. It's got a good bite to it. And here's another little mute, you know, who made this one? It doesn't have a name on it. I'm not sure where that came from. See, I buy mutes on eBay. I'll buy a lot of mutes, you know, not a lot of mutes, but a lot of mutes, where it'll be like 15 mutes in one collection. And all these little mutes that I've never seen or heard of will come in it. And I've actually got some real gems that way. Now, the mute I've been using as a pixie for the last few years is this one made by Dennis Wick. And it's made for D-E flat cornet mute, or E or D flat, I'm sorry, E flat or D cornets. It's a straight mute made for those horns. And it's a smaller bell horn, so it actually works well as a pixie mute with your any standard plunger. And it plays better in tune. It's less stuffy. You can play in the full range. You can go all the way down to the bottom. So that's what I've been using for the last several years. Now, in developing our new plunger, Ed and I discovered something really cool. And in the development of the plunger, in order for the plunger to be in tune, as I was discussing before, it's a little bit larger than most plungers. It needs that for the intonation to be as good as it is. So we noticed with using this larger plunger that it's big enough to use over a regular straight mute. So let's see, this is a mute that I like to use. This is the Vacchiano straight mute. And it works fine as a straight mute and the role of a pixie mute with the new plunger we just made. The plunger's big enough to use regular straight mute. All the way down to the bottom of the horn, and it plays perfectly. So this is going to be my working pixie mute from now on. It's just a regular Vacchiano, Alessi Vacchiano straight mute with the new plunger. So I'm pretty excited about that. Do we have any questions about pixie mutes?
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I got kicked off my internet, but I'm back. Seems like it's still going.
Yeah, we're going.
All right. I have a question in the chat asking not about pixie mutes, but about Louis Armstrong's mutes. And he wants to know, Robbie wants to know what kind of mute was Louis Armstrong using during the Hot Fives, like in Sweethearts on Parade.
I'm not sure exactly. You know who would know that is, do you know John Eric Kelso? Robbie? Look him up. He's on Facebook, and man, he's an expert at the history of the mute, especially like the older styles. Louis Armstrong, it may have been something like this. This is an old Shastock straight mute, and it's got a maple wood resonator on the bottom of it. You know, so it's got a great sound. But I don't know for sure. Just because everybody's been playing it. You know, so this may have been it. This is an older straight mute from back in the day made by Shastock. It could have been that. I think Roger Ingram actually has the mute that belonged to Louis Armstrong, if I'm not mistaken. I seem to remember him telling me that or showing me that one time when I was going through Chicago. I could be wrong. I get confused easily. But Pops used a lot of straight mutes back then. So it may have been one of these. I don't know. But like, that's a good question for John Eric Kelso. Look him up on Facebook. Send him a message. Tell him I sent you. Tell him I said, hey, man, because he's a wealth of knowledge, man. He's, you know, we've been threatening to do a mute hang together for years, and it just hasn't happened yet. But he is a wealth of knowledge, man. John Eric Kelso.
There's a question from Angel. He wants to know, what's the meaning of the word gut bucket Bubba Miley used to reference?
I'm not really sure exactly. I've heard the term, and when I hear it, I just think playing something really deep and greasy, you know, gut bucket blues, you know. I mean, the way Bubber played, I think, is probably the definition of gut bucket, you know. You know, that kind of really bluesy, deep down, soulful. That's what I think of when I think of gut bucket. I don't know an official definition, but I think probably just the way that Bubba Miley played, you could say, is gut bucket. All right.
Cool. I also have a question that I see on Facebook. Someone's asking about a hole in the plunger. Some of the plungers have holes and some of them don't. If you want to talk about the difference between that.
Yeah, well, I just talked about that.
Okay.
Yeah, we kind of covered that already.
Okay, sorry, it must have been when I was struggling with the internet. Yeah, if anyone has any more questions, feel free to raise your hand, shout out in the chat, or even on Facebook. I'm scrolling through the Facebook Live. So while we're getting our final questions up, just want to say, please make sure to join us again, everyone. We'll be hosting free live events every day throughout the coming weeks, including more master classes and conversations with members of the JLCO, question and answer sessions with Wynton, live performances. Our next JLCO masterclass is going to be with saxophonist and vocalist Camille Thurman. Camille will be offering tips for aspiring saxophonists and answering questions from her fans. We'll be broadcasting live on Monday, April 20th at this same time, 4 p.m. Eastern on Zoom and also Facebook Live. For a full list of upcoming events and archived concerts, please check out Jazz Lincoln Center's brand new online hub at jazz.org. Thank you again to everyone for being a part of this community. If it's within your means, please consider making a donation. We are a nonprofit organization in New York City. We're committed to entertaining, enriching, and expanding a global community for jazz. We're so grateful for contributions of any amount, and to our supporters and donors, we can't thank you enough. So, any more questions? Jeffrey wants to know what kind of horn you're playing on right now, Kenny.
This is made by Mike Del Quadro, who's a trumpet builder in Las Vegas. Dear friend of mine, and it's the model is called Grand Campagna. He's Italian, and so that's Italian for big bell. It's got a big bell. So that's the horn I'm playing on. I've been playing on it for 2 years, and I love it. I want to mention one other mute that I want to talk about real briefly is the hat mute. Much like the plunger. Now, this is an old one. I've got 3 of these. I had 4. I gave one to Lou Soloff. In fact, there's a picture that's floated around the internet a lot with Lou wearing his hat mute like that. That's a mute that I gave him for his 64th birthday. And the first thing he played on it was When I'm 64. But this is a great mute. It's used much like the plunger to get a wah effect. It was used by bands in the 30s and 40s a lot. It's a great sounding mute. Trombone players have to use one of these stands with it. It's just like a wire stand, but it's got this thing on the top of it that the hat mute actually rests in, like that, so they can play into it because it's too cumbersome to be able to hold and play for most trombone players. So you want to try to find a stand for it too if you can find these. These are a really great tool, real great sound that most people don't use, especially younger people. Most modern big bands don't use the hat mute. And it's a shame because it's a really great and can be really warm, very cool effect when you got an entire brass section using them sonically and visually. It can be very effective and very cool. So this is a hat mute. I've got 2 more of them sitting on my table. But it's a lot of fun to play. This one has felt lining on the inside, and it pops right out like that. And it's just, like something you would find in a lady's hat back in the day. They put it inside this hat, and it gives a little warmer sound, and so there's less bounce back on you when you're playing it. It absorbs a little bit of the sound as well. So this is a really cool mute and a lot of fun to play with. So I just want to share that one with you as well. And I think that's all we have time for.
Yeah, I mean, we could take one more. You want to take one more final question?
Yeah.
All right, let's take a final question from Carol.
All right.
Hey,
Go
Kenny.
ahead, Carol.
Hi, Kenny.
Hi, Carol. What's happening?
How are you?
Oh, good to see you, Mom.
So good to see you too, honey. Question. I knew nothing about mutes, and now I'm an expert. So I want to thank you for that. How many mutes do you own?
Well, on the table here, I counted there's 158. I've got another 18 on the piano. I've got a full set of mutes at Jazz Lincoln Center. I've got a full set of mutes in the studio where I do Sesame Street. And I've got, I don't know, probably another random 20 or 25 mutes in storage. So over 200. I've got over 200.
Wow. Okay. That's great. You're a real mutant.
It's a museum over here.
It's a mute. Oh, that's good. I love it.
I gotta give credit to John Kelso for that one. Yeah. All right, good to see you, Carol.
Thanks, Kenny. This was great.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Thanks, Chloe.
All right, everyone. I think that's just about all we have time for. Thank you so much, Kenny, for this. Everyone, please keep up with us on social media. Search for Jazz Lincoln Center on Facebook or follow us on Instagram, Twitter, jazz.org. That's jazz, jazz.org, O-R-G. Oh, and Kenny, Chathan wanted you to repeat the name of the teacher in Chicago for him.
Okay, his name is Chuck Parrish, P-A-R-R-I-S-H.
Awesome. There you go, Chathan. There's your teacher.
Yeah, look Chuck up. He's a great teacher and a great guy and a dear friend of mine, man.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to leave the chat room open for another couple minutes if anyone wants to check out those links that we posted. But other than that, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Have a great weekend. Thank you, Kenny.
All right. Thank you, Chloe. Thank you, everybody, for signing on. Appreciate you all. Have a great day.